Hey everybody, I'm Chris, and this is my channel Chesapeake Chris. Thanks for stopping by. We're done with all the Snell knot tying tools. I hope you enjoyed watching how they work. So this week we're going to cover knots, how to tie a Snell knot without a tool, how to tie a swivel on, how to tie a loop in your line after you snell it. And we are going to cover one tool, but it's not for tying Snell knots, it's for tying loops in your line.
Cool. This is the video I've been waiting for.
So this video has got some pretty good information on it, so you'll want to stick around. In a previous video, when I showed you how to use this tool to tie a Snell knot, I showed you how the handle unscrewed and it has these needle parts to clean out the eyelet of a hook. Well, you can also use this to tie a small loop in your line. So let me show you how this works. Okay, it works very similar to do a loop in your line. You fold your line back over itself like that. Then you take a loop and you make a loop, and then you stick the single loop through the double loop of line, just like you're going to tie a regular knot. So it should look something like that. Then this time, you put the long needle through the single loop and the short needle through the double loop. Just the opposite of when you were tying a hook on. Now you start to tighten this thing down. Once again, don't pull too tight, you may bend the needles. Once again, when you get it halfway tight, you got to slide it up so that the line comes off that short needle, but not the long needle. Then you pull a little tighter. And take it off the needles. And that will make a very small loop in your line. Once again, I don't care for it too much because it makes a pretty small loop, but you could snap it onto a swivel. That's how you use it to make a small loop in your line. And now I'll show you some ways to tie loops in your line after you get your hook attached that are, I think, better and easier than that tool we just showed. And then once you get your hook snelled, then you probably want to put a loop out on this end so you can attach it to a snap swivel. That's what I do. Well, they make a tool to help you do that. It's a loop tying tool. This little guy right here. But it's pretty easy to use. All you do is you take some fishing line, take the end of your fishing line, double it back like that to make a loop. Then you're going to wrap it around and make a loop like that. Make a loop like that right there and just hold that loop right there. Then you hook this big double loop down on that part and then you twist it 2 or 3 times. We're just going to twist it twice. Then you take that loop there and you hook it just down through the middle section there. You don't hook it over the whole head, you run it down through that middle slot. Then you can take your 2 ends and starting to tighten up. And once you get it that tight, then you can roll this thing over, and when you pull down on the fishing line, that loop there will come off the one part, but that other loop will stay, and then you just pull tight. And then you take it out of that middle slot. And there you go. There's a good strong loop to attach to a swivel. Although I have this loop tying tool, I don't use it because I use what I believe is called a surgeon's figure 8 knot. And it's pretty easy to do too. Once again, all you do is you pull a loop in your line like this. You want to have a couple inches there. Then you take and you start like you're going to tie a normal knot. Right? You're running around like that, like you're going to tie a normal knot. But then you take this double line loop and you twist it 1 time, like that. Then you stick that other loop through the loop you made by twisting it, and then you pull tight. That makes a perfect loop knot. It's very strong. Like I said, I think it's called a surgeon's figure 8. It's just that quick too. So that's how I do it. All these tools and things that I showed, they're just for mainly Snell and small hooks. If I'm snelling a larger hook for larger fish, I don't use any of those. When you're tying Snell knots by hand, there's a lot of different ways to tie a Snell knot. Some are simple, some are not. Here's a pretty simple one. You run the fishing line through the eyelet of the hook from the point side. Then you just take and you wrap this down around the hook, shank 6, 7, 8 times. Then you put your finger on the loops, and then you take the end of that line you wrapped around and you run it back through the eyelet of the hook the other direction and pull it up tight, just like that. A lot of people, I guess, do this, use this style of Snell knot. I don't care for it a whole lot for 2 reasons. The line that you run back up and run through the eyelet of the hook is actually on the outside of the wraps, which I don't care for. And this line right here, it can push back through. If it gets slack in the line, just like that, it can push back through and the knot can start to unravel. I say a lot of people use it. I don't care for it. Here's another way to tie a Snell knot. It's not quite as easy as the first one, but it's still pretty simple. Get yourself a length of line. You fold it back on itself so that you get a loop. You run it along the shank of the hook like that. You pinch it with your fingers. You take your tag end and you wrap it around the shank of the hook 6, 7, 8 times. Try not to overlap your wraps. You pinch those loops so that they don't come out. Then you take that end that you wrapped around and you run it through that little loop you left at the end. And then you grab both ends of your line and you start to tighten it down. You should wet your knot. And you slide it up the shank of the hook. And then you can really start to tighten it down. And there you go, you got another Snell knot. I don't like this one as much because the tag end of the line only goes under that last wrap that cinches it down, but it does stay better than the first one. This line doesn't want to push back through it. A lot of people use that one. I use, I believe, what's called the modified Snell knot, and what you do is you pass your line through your hook eye. You always run it through from the point side. Then you just let it curl around and you run it back through the eye the same direction and just pull an inch or 2 out so that now you got this big loop and it goes through your hook twice. I don't need this much line, I'm gonna cut a little off. Then you take this loop that you made when you passed it around and you just start to wrap it down around the shank. And you wrap it around, once again, 6, 7, 8 times, whatever you want. And after you get it wrapped around, don't overlap your wraps. Put your finger on it there to hold them wraps and then just start to pull this line here. And as you pull that line, it'll tighten the Snell knot up. And that's how I Snell my big hooks. And then of course, once I get that done, then I'm just gonna double back this over like this. And I'm gonna do my surgeon's figure 8 by doing that. Take this double loop, twist it one time, run that loop through that loop you just twisted, pull it, trim off both tag ends. And there you go. There's a fully snelled, larger hook with a nice loop in it to put on your swivel. Now when it comes to tying my swivel on, once again, there's a bunch of fancy knots out there you can do, and I used to tie some different knots like uni knots or whatever. But I found online, when I looked, I found this knot, and this is how I tie my swivels on. It's quick, it's easy, it's simple, and all you do is you make a loop in your line, right? And then you take, I got a swivel here, you stick this loop through the eyelet of your swivel, like so. Then you come around like this, and you tie half of a knot, like that. Then you just drop this swivel through that loop and cinch it down tight. Just like that. I think it's called the Palomar knot. It's simple, it's easy, it stays, it's strong. That's the knot I use now to tie my swivels on. I don't do anything fancy. That knot right there, I've used it a lot, it works great. So that's how I tie my swivels. Nothing fancy. Now all these knots I covered in these videos, these are the knots I use, and I use them pretty much only on monofilament line. I use monofilament line all the time. I've tried braided and stuff. I really don't like braided line. I only use it if I'm like down at the Outer Banks fishing for big fish, drone fishing or something. Then maybe I'll use some pretty strong braided line. But for all my fishing here around Chesapeake Bay, I always use monofilament line. Those knots all work well with monofilament line. So I hope you enjoyed this series of 4 videos. Hopefully it showed you a lot about different knots, different hooks, different tools are out there, which ones work, which ones don't.
That surgeon's figure 8 knot and that Palomar knot both seem so simple, I think I could even tie them.
Either way, thanks for stopping by. You guys know the drill. If you like these videos, give me a thumbs up, like, share this video, hit the subscribe button so you get notified when I come out with new videos. And I'll see you on the next video.